The Zombielands. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang or a whimper, but with zombies breaking down the door. Amanda Hocking, Hollowland. 1. The Dead Next Door. I need to tell corpse colleagues here that standard practices here stray from the standards of practice, whose standards of practice were created by Stand for Practice, the standardization of practices group on the standards for unembodying the practices of standard practice in everyday practices of institutional standards. You stray, I say. Blinking zombies, absent black hole zombie avatars, unmuted and fully present zombies, muted but nodding zombies. The hemoglobin counts are low, none respond. All becoming undead minds contort around the new reason of the consulto necropole invitee of this interminal meeting. Tired zombies are interpolated by corpulent hours of neo-NR, by domineering dressing gown gorps of dribble-down dogma, by designate dictats and convivial-sounding samizat of zombification. Through opportunistic zoomificatory means viz. Dressing gowns, the advantage taken to re-entrench vision, read visionary statements, reinforce microaggressional metrics, off-camera confected in the undialectical techno-babble and algorithms of zombie time. You know, blank screen interruptus, you know about apples. Well, apples and baskets and rottenness are key identifiers of an analogy. Well, naming no names, she grinned, surveying for face-registered fear, naming no names, but the analogy is apt. Rot rots a potential fecund plot. You know who you are, you rotters, she smiled. Not really, rictus grin. Analogy musing, she gazed off camera, nodding, satisfied, dribble mouth licking. She's in necrophiliac reverie of private joke recognition as silence consolidates complicity to a corporo imaginary zombie plump on munching rotten life lessons, TM. All of this is astrocare for the cultivated development of sustainable models of epistemological growth based on the marketization of median sensibility. Census obtained and agro-sustained by contracted receptive unthink franks. Rotten apples fall up trees by being strategically plump and nice, putting at ease the confections to unchallenge violently rotten taste notes, after which they dribble their gobbled droplets on the now bowed heads of the bodies once bright with budding, but which now become bowlings, scarred and scared in homophomic permanent preparation to be the next chunk donor. Bow your heads in silent complicity and fealty of feedathonic zombie kisses. Deferential deferment to dignity sporting, diligence doing to excuse for salary jobs worth with non-commentary as self-neutralising effacement of the bodied politic giving over to amnesic rituals of despair, gobbling grins accepting termination of self-determination, redetermined in the termination of ambitions or the deter of the determination to stare down the death stares of salary-starred negotiated administrators. All heads are now reverentially bowed as monitored mic-off imply instructions. It is common sense to concur. As the very important prognosticator spot engorging half the meeting continues. Key performance indicators, KPIs, this year will inculcate equity, transparency, lucidity and entrail the re-internment of auditable adaptations to actuality as actually practical. KPIs this year indicate, as otherwise stated, performances key to the key of instruments, in the key of reason, or blunt indications of indicators. Nods. The Senior Zombified Leadership Group, SZLG, are now referring to KPIs not as acronymed commonly, but as Key Performativity Instrumentality, or, more pointedly, Kleptomaniacal Purloiners of Integrity. Such puns will usually be pun-ished, as we want to externally entrail the transparency, or, as one consul put it, offer awful as is. Nods. Scribbles. In other news of irrationality masked as reason, personal development achievements, PDAs, are now provisionally disabling admonitions in recognition of the good work of the Audit Office and their systematic eradication of edification algorithms, leading to the inevitable zombification of uniqueness and the edibility of professional ingrowths. Our consultant outreachers of awkwardly administrative ministrations data trialled these new acro visions to educato-constitutive converts dressed as straw pollsters, and they were deemed populist within permissible parameters. Nods, scribbles, dribbles. Interminable adverminations of business proselytizing projective perorations. Finally, Viceroy Corps's envoy finesses, these new practices will also lead to the re-enfranchisement of hitherto known as job-habbers to the opportunity statuses we are describing as not quite or hardly alives, which, of course, enables the bottom line to flourish as effluential repurposement of reanimates, which, with this last phrase, she determinated transmission muted to insta-us in state meaning. None dared respond, not hardly the even of those from whom offer extended, until quite came a hark. Quite! It was Duncan, reverentially affirmative, communico expert, hirsute hierophant of hieratic hierarchy humping, and might I say, if I may, that, well, I think for all the thinkers here, and well, across the organ splication, that, well, this, well, excursus in energetic edification, this non-egregious outline of effusive expectatorations, is quite indubitably, indeed entrancing and enhancing for the core skill in deditudination, for the produce users or produce inducers, for us all, in fact. And, he continued, registering not the sneer of the ribald rube rumble from the room, well, what you have so lucibratedly elucidated with such lithe lucidity here is what we so widely invite and want, particularly for the widening of the particle ipation and for the aspiration to reassign the augured age groups into undeditude by offering clear and transparent transplant potions to people populate the place with potables. Quite simply, he simpered as his face dissolved into his neck. I love you. Embarrassed silence. Quite, Duncan drawled, polyfiller for the chasmic killer of the Sire tribe, as the humble hobbyism of his zombie background sitars and Siamese simians percolated the performative symbolism of the well-plump and worldly. Shuffle, shuffle, zombie shuffle. Well, piping hot with peak and perceptive performance of cherridge, the manager mic on that sound, we shall run to the dead end of the time designation. Zombie shuffles. And with butts sequestered, remaining on-sat with hands adjacent, the transmission terminated. 2. Warm bodies. Caustic structures corrode conviviality or the common strive for such. Cancerous visions metastasize through methods seeming to strengthen. Rudimentary business principles of anti-knowledge coalesce as success semblance, crude clots coagulating around convenient costs. Zombies pivot, pluck, and point to protocols of appointment roll calls, mirroring maws and muzzles, always ready prepped for plasmic exchange. Centres of power are asserted through the strategic sanguinity of bloodlet. Exploited innovation ooze, emergent seed with efficiency bombs. Compliance is cathected to chitterlings, so the toxicity pools resources in branded tote bags as ready-meat portions, flesh pans of hardly paid, for participants, prospects, customer, consumer spongy munch. Such stuff like the liver and lights of academic hides, served up and voted with rump and lump sums for performance slices. Endemic, acerbic, acidic, corrosive culture clashes, groom greetings. No culture class when the monogenean monocultures are teleological. Enculturation is viz. Monotropic enculturation of cruer cephalic. telltale toxicities of exchange devalues, the tell-all telegraphed signals to phrasal pith retinues, proud in pate and hierarchy signed. Alienated in the everyday more of maximalized minimalization, the becoming undead cling to unionized gestures of liquidarity. Undeaditude in hand bops, sour coffee, hemocooler moments, corridor bants, corpus Christi bonuses, heads bowed for armistice, gifts of unhygienic displays of masked hygiene in the Liberty Library, of hot spaces vacated to vacuity for perch of other half-bitten bums. The serum dripping sanction to sip the tar-black bile of private mugshots, the poster presentations of the demon strable will of being well. 3. Brain dead, aka dead alive. Are zombies unreal narrators and other distractions? Critical Zombie Theory 101, CZT 101 class discusses such victual vitals. Today's lecture attempts to debunk propagandic infundibulums veining around campus by anti-deaders, aka non-mouth breeders, or aka non-viscera corpuses, or aka so-called real-life livers. See last week's lesson on skills for real life, aka here isn't. The propaganda that zombies, technically, post-ICU, are not alive, but in a state of almost entelechy, or plasmic potentiality, that zombies are not able to not demonstrate a theory of unmind. As such, so the pernicious platelets circulates and churn it, zombies cannot not offer an unobjective account of their inactions, or not fully unaccount for their own or others' subjecthood. In short, there is a viscous rumour that the undead have no core and are given shape and unidentity by fractured, desiccated, disemboweled embolisms of ideas of the non-dead, aka the livers. Pernicious, baseless, frivolous. Lecturer designate undead 2.3.6 spits. We have insurance agencies securing agencies and proffering unpersonhood, and which also peddle putative punishments and prop up progress narratives to ensure the platelet perversion of every echelon with undeaditude. Lecturer now gestures to the blackboard and chalk circles the Romero paradox. The RP, he informs, asserts by theatrical feats of movable rhetorical gestures that the abject, so NIMAD by Christopher, is actually object, as conceptualized, actualized, intersectionalized, and essentialized, covering all bases, in the formula two uns make un, or dead un equals uns alive. Thereby vis ergo thus and therefore making mawkish mockery of all those lies about zombies' inability to form coherent thoughts or discharge in charginess. Across campus, zombie voices can be heard screeching from drafty classrooms. Here, we must ensure dunce dependency on the Zombie Incogitance Act. Around these principles, adapts agilely adapt to singular tasks. Vision viable. Elsewhere. Here, in advanced deployment of jingoistic jargon, we will build on last year's module, Fundaments of Jaw Argon for Zombies, to enable you the fulfillment of criteria based on real-life enablers of inchoate ideals of function. I notice, with delight, that you are all wearing your module-mandated and mandatory polyester suits, that you wear your shiny brogues, and crucially, that you have brought your clipboards, attached to which are unutilization surveys of zombie spaces. Today, techniques of resisting, dismissing, demeaning, and denigrating dissent. Elsewhere. Remember that the undead, unwell, unbeing, incorporate, unfitness, unfeel, ungood gobble-togethers, sconce socializations, and grey matter natters are deliberately designed as cloistral-phobic replacements of what was once hilariously peddled as, by anti-zombie, non-necropolic lunatic lifers as social justice and inclusivity. In spews sick at me. And across the unquad of the recently undead, We hear the final sallies of Lecturer Designate Undead 2.3.6 in CZT 101. And remember, in order to concertedly convert all those almost zombies to fully fledged feeders, they must be instructed in the unart of interest into intersusception, aka the commodification of the enheartened zombitude to serve up the oleaginous vascularities to envision the cistern system. Oh, but hark. A surfeit of anti-zombies offer placard protest outside of the central orifice of the Viceroy Corpse and their edibility enablers. These placard protesters sloganeer that zombies are simple-minded, vegetatively incapable of higher educative functioning, and who are bent on destroying skills they so unextol in others. Gobbett summarised as critical engagement. Ugh. Already overseeing an emergency meeting to preempt anti-enlightenment, to root out the rudeness of rudimentary rumination, to liquefy the looseness of loutish dissent, to dissolve the deleteriousness of dynamism, to masticate the malicious mechanisms of malcontent, Viceroy Corps's console, VCC, deliciously suggests they will be STEMified, which is not a not brutal line of purification, and which is not part of the plan, reference, quote, subsumption of the underhand by stealthy statements of progressiveness, susp, written by the Viceroy Corps itself on a cigarette butt during an alleged interview. STEMification and susp, the VCC continues, together are already underwaying through the operations of complicated matrices of micturated complicity confected by the self-willed masks of wellness magnification, whose uptake is measured in perceivables of engagitudinousness percentages, or aka uptake amenables of occuput-upwiths and sanious samples. As such, she finalises, critique after these corpuscular conditions becomes fluffer for the fanning of the vicious profusions of invidious insidiousness. FFVPII. 4. Return of the Living Dead. Jacking into the trajectory vectors of the catastrophic, zombies thrive. Mainlined with technocultural verve violence, ratified in lobby engines to grind down simply unsolidifying flesh, liquescent at acidic lick. Where also anonymized Moors munch metrics streamed in semiospheric steams of opportunism and opiate obsolescence oozing orders. Managers manage manageable deaths by the bucketful, and the swan songs of the barely hopeful are halved in daily quotas. They promote having read on them as streamlined signals of rationalization, accepting the inevitables driving us here through, e.g., viral vicissitudes, pandemic perspicacities, quarantine qualifiers to make all necro-political necessitation of inevitable fall to order. Or, as the circle sayings circulating in the circulatory system stymieing stimulation say, remain rational, logical. We've got to remain logical. We've got to. There's no choice. It has to be that. Zombies of the highly Oedipal institutions, unite.